The government is working with the beings, werewolves are real, and blue orbs are dangerous. These are some of the things that we have learned this year, or at least I have. There's so much news that I have covered and research that I have covered this year that I thought it would be really instructive to go over a few of the highlights today. So join me on this UFO roundup. This is Jack Connor with Cosmic Road. I talk about UFOs and the paranormal. Please hit like, please subscribe, share on social media, and comment below as I'm going through the story. Also, please consider joining the channel, becoming a channel member to receive exclusive access and videos. Doing so supports the channel, or you can simply leave a tip in the tip jar with the super thanks feature below. Thank you. I had been planning to do a year-end roundup of all the stories that I've covered so far this year in trying to glean the information from the best possible news sources and stories and the things that we have uncovered this year, or at least that I have come to believe are true based on the research that I've done and the stories that I've covered. Separating the wheat from the chaff, if you will. But then I started to look through the videos that I've made this year, and I've covered some amazing stuff. I mean, not to toot my own horn, it's just been an amazing year for UFO news in general. In research, in whistleblowers that have come forward and information that has come forward. And I realized it would just take hours to really go through all the highlights of the year. So I'm just going to talk about a few specific highlights that I've covered fairly recently. Well, we know from Lynn Buchanan, the famous remote viewer Lynn Buchanan, I did a story about him and how he had seen beings, that is aliens or whatever you want to call them, working with U.S. military personnel and other personnel on a black ops base. So that's one example of beings working with the government. Another example is Ingo Swann. He also talks about beings working with the government or possibly against the government. There was a UFO that came out of the water and was shooting at him. So if that story is true, then there is conflict between the government and the beings. So it's a little bit unclear from that story if we are actually working with the beings, or at least the group that he was with was working with the beings, but they were definitely interested in using him to spy on the beings, in particular the moon, a base on the moon. That is covered in Ingo Swann's book Penetration, so check that out. We also know from the Terry Lovelace story, the veteran Terry Lovelace, who's an experiencer, kind of a super experiencer, and he has been vetted by no less than Lou Elizondo. Well, he saw over 50 U.S. military personnel working with the beings aboard a giant UFO. So those are some of the pieces of evidence that we have, among many others, but those are some fairly credible sources, that the U.S. military and the government is working with the beings. Now, according to Lance Corporal Wygant, it may extend even beyond the government. It may be a multinational consortium. The control group may be a multinational consortium. He was saying even the Chinese were there assisting in crash retrievals and in the operations by the control group. We also know from his story and numerous others that there is a crash retrieval program, a UFO crash retrieval program. In fact, Chris Mellon just confirmed the Eric Davis Tom Wilson notes as legitimate, which cements, in my mind, the legitimacy of the UFO crash retrieval program. So it's really interesting that there is a crash retrieval program and we are also working with the beings. Why would we be retrieving crashes, presumably to reverse engineer their technology, if we're already working with the beings? Is it because we're simply trying to hide those UFOs? We're retrieving them and hiding them so nobody else can see them, so the story doesn't get out? Or is there more going on? Are there different factions doing different things. I also did a story recently from a very credible Air Force guy who's more of a technical kind of guy. He's not read into the program. He's not, in the UFO stuff at all. But he happened to work with NASA, like back in the 70s, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. And he was with a video technician, if I'm remembering correctly. And all the technicians were all freaked out because they had just learned there was a base on the backside of the moon. He didn't know whether it was alien or human, and he didn't press for answers because he was afraid to. And in fact, that's something that Len Buchanan said when talking about seeing beings on the base. He said, you don't ask if you don't need to ask. That's dangerous. That's also something Lance Corporal Wygant alluded to. He talked about people being taken out who were inconvenience to the control group. So why wasn't he taken out? Why wasn't Len Buchanan taken out? Great questions. Possibly because they were only able to reveal a small slice of the picture. What is the bigger slice? Well, alien abductions, higher dimensions, all sorts of craziness. But as those details largely come from higher level experiencers and remote viewers and stuff like that, more woo-woo sources that I find credible, but some people probably won't, so I won't cover that in this segment. Just sticking to the more nuts and bolts stuff that can be confirmed by legitimate, very highly reputable sources. Speaking of which, we've got, James Latatsky, Colin Kelleher, and George Knapp talking about the migratory habits of skinwalkers, aka werewolves or shapeshifters, whatever they are exactly. There were so many of them, and the reports were so credible that the Bass team was getting during their investigation of not just Skinwalker Ranch, but the area around Skinwalker Ranch, when they were interviewing locals that lived in the area, and they were seeing skinwalkers, or whatever they are. And there were so many of them, they were even able to track what George Knapp calls, I'm assuming that he wrote that since he's the writer guy, the migratory habits of these beings. What does that mean? If they're intelligent beings, why are they migrating? Maybe it just meant they were moving. They tended to move in a certain direction. I don't know. He did not elaborate on that at all. It's one of the most tantalizing and intriguing parts of the book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. But again, he did not elaborate on that at all. However, another thing he did elaborate on quite a bit was the blue orbs and how they can be deadly to human beings and others. I've heard other reports where a cat, for example, interacted with a blue orb and subsequently got cancer and died. So that is very intriguing. However, I've also heard of other blue orbs that appear to be benevolent. And one case covered in Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, a blue orb interacted with a man. Actually, there are multiple blue orbs. Came into his car. One, as he was driving, one passed through him, and he got this rare form of cancer. Now some beings interacted with him and apparently tried to cure him. They said, we have to undo this, which is very intriguing. And but he still came down with this rare form of cancer. He was able to beat it, however, but there are numerous examples in that book of the biological, the health effects of interacting with the blue orbs and possibly other aspects of the phenomenon, which is something that we've seen again and again, people encountering UFOs and getting burns and bad things happening. Another weird thing that can happen is the hitchhiker effect. You encounter the phenomenon, especially on places like Skinwalker Ranch or more of the haunted locations, and you come back with a hitchhiker or an attachment. I have personal experience with that. But I'm not going to talk about my own personal interactions here, although it has been an amazing year for me, interacting with the phenomenon, or what I call the greater phenomenon. And maybe I'll make a separate video on that, but that's outside the scope of this video. We also know from the JFK document dump that MJ-12 is real. Now, in that document dump, they didn't say exactly what MJ-12 was. They referred briefly to Cold War psychological operations, but they didn't go into any detail about what MJ-12 was, other than JFK really wanted to know about it. And some intriguing people were connected to it. So I think the jury is still out on MJ-12. However, it did exist, it was highly secretive, and JFK wanted to know about it. We also know from the abduction of Barbara Lamb that the beings are watching UFO researchers. And they actually were very curious to learn what she was learning and what the public was learning about what the hell they were doing here. About the information she was getting from people she had hypnotically regressed. We're talking about experiencers who had been abducted sometimes many times, and they were uncovering these memories through hypnotic regression. And, she was publishing this information, and the public was learning some of what the beings were doing. And we're talking, hybridization, various other things. The beings really wanted to know what we knew, and they actually made a copy of her mind to sift through its contents. So that is highly intriguing. Now, again, that is from a regressed memory, regressed hypnosis, regression hypnosis, conducted by Dolores Cannon on Barbara Lamb. So if you're squeamish about hypnosis and regression hypnosis, there's your warning. By the way, I know the lighting is terrible right now. My light bulb on my light burned out, and I have a new light on the way. So hopefully that will be resolved in a day or two. What else have we learned? Well, John Ramirez, CIA officer John Ramirez, retired, has said the aliens are coming in 2027. This aligns very closely with a video I did about apocalyptic modalities, where there are all sorts of apocalyptic modalities, apocalypse myths / New Earth myths, because we're also talking about not just the end of the world, but the creation of the new world, that all occur within the span of like 2026 to 2033. So within that span of time, there are a whole bunch of different apocalyptic modalities. What else did we learn? Well, we know from Dr. Travis Taylor that the glowing green pyramids, they probably weren't green because it was the night vision camera, but the glowing green pyramids, as we all know them, floating over the U.S. warship, was actually a pyramid, and it was a genuine UFO. It was not a Chinese or Russian drone or balloon. It could not be conventionally explained, which is the narrative that Bray and Moultrie advanced to Congress, going against the findings of their chief scientist, Travis Taylor. So they deliberately lied to Congress, and so they cannot be trusted. They are carrying out and perpetuating the cover-up, and presumably their ally, who is now the leader of Arrow, Kirkpatrick, will continue to perpetuate the same cover-up. Time will tell if he is a little bit more disclosure-friendly or not, but I am, at this point, not persuaded that he is. What else have we learned? Well, Mussolini had a UFO and now it is in the possession of the U.S. That may or may not have anything to do with the Marconi Company and the weird murders that occurred to employees of that company in the 90s. What else have we learned? Well, we know from multiple credible accounts that I've covered this year that the United States military has fired upon UFOs. And we know from Ingo Swann's case that they fire back. So it looks like we are at war, or at least in conflict with some group of beings while we are working with other beings. Meanwhile, we are engaged in UFO crash retrievals. All of that has been pretty well confirmed at this point. Anyway, so those are some of the things that I have covered this year and fairly recently too. To do a deeper dive into the news stories and the research that I've covered this year would require a much longer video. But I think in this fairly short video, you'll see that it's been a gangbusters year, and we, or at least I, have learned a whole lot, and I have advanced my understanding of the phenomenon, and especially the government's interaction with the phenomenon. There's still so much to unpack and explore, and we see dots, and some of them are connected, some of them are not. And so we have a lot of connecting to do, a lot of gaps that need to be filled in. But we're starting to see some pieces of the puzzle now become much more clear. I hope you've appreciated this UFO news roundup. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. Please smash the subscribe button and hit the bell so you don't miss a single video. Please join me on social media. There's Facebook and Twitter links below. And please, if you enjoy these videos, please consider supporting the channel by becoming a channel member. See the first line in the description below, and there's 2 tiers of membership to receive exclusive access and videos. Until next time, this is Jack with Cosmic Road.